So we all know that saying, the real famous one, right? What is a man, the miserable pile of secrets? Yeah, you know, it has some truth to it if you ignore the fact that it makes absolutely fucking zero sense and answers a question with a question. But that sagacious saying has absolutely nothing to do with this video. So I was feeling like I gushed over the 90s a little too public and very loudly in my first two videos. Me being the label dodging person that I am, I'm gonna be more mindful to avoid appearing that I actually care or enjoy a specific era before the internet inevitably comes around and take that joy away from me. But believe me when I say I'm already accustomed at keeping my interest to a minimum on the internet. Being that I am a early Gen Z kid, I'm already familiarized with the act of anything being openly enjoyed, stomped upon by the masses to enjoy, if you catch me. That's to say I'm still too young to truly be miserable, but old enough to know that I'm going to be even more miserable very soon. No one reminds me this more than my demonic clown girl paralysis demon, my best friend, and Jesse Hartman. So most of you who clicked this video out of curiosity or on accident are probably wondering two things. Can you have a demonic clown girl paralysis demon, and what the hell is a Sammy? And the answer to both of those things are, I don't know. But if you spell Sammy with two M's and a Y instead of a I-E, you get the short-lived but weirdly still remembered, well, at least by me, alt-rock pavement alternative outfit and brainchild of all-around artiste Jesse Hartman and Luke Wood, the man who would go on to do big things, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Debut album Tales of Great Net Glory, that's Lude, are on the agenda today. And I know a second ago I described them as a pavement alternative, but in all honesty, that's like being generous, like overly generous, really, because, well, Pavement is a tier 3 soda, a Vernus, if you will, compared to Green Day's Coke mass market appeal. So if Pavement is Vernus, Green Day is Coke, what the hell is Sammy in this analogy? Rat piss? To that I say, only if the rat had a diet of tonic water and ginger and lived like a mid-90s hipster. Rambling, they're more of an Inca Gold soda type of band. But that being their sound is at times admittedly reminiscent of certain Pavement works, you can't really talk Sammy without mentioning Pavement. So I discovered Sammy at one of the many low points of my life, and it never really struck me as anything more than an obtuse but paradoxically flimsy band. That's to say, it didn't really make any real strong first impressions. The album I stumbled across was the 96 sophomore effort, Tales of Great Net Glory. And may I say, what the actual fuck does that title mean? Like, genuinely, it's not bad. And in my opinion, it certainly fits the band better than anything else, in ways that I can't really quite explain, but it means nothing if you read it as a non-perverse individual. As someone who spends an embarrassing amount on Reddit, I'm inclined to think otherwise, but I digress. I came across Tales of Glorious Head while working an overnight shift at my local mire, and it had some steep competition from day one, since at the time I was delving deeper into my mid-90s alternative phase, a never-ending struggle, finding many bands that would later become staples of my everyday playlist. But it also caused my first problem when listening to the band. Why the fuck would I listen to this when I have superior choices? Because in that same time period, I had just found out about bands like Built to Spill and Saves the Day and even Placebo. Bands with larger discographies, hence more time to explore new possibilities in sound, styles, keyword being possible. I'm looking at you, Placebo. And here I'm listening to some movie montage-esque music to the soundtrack of an indie teenage rom-com set in Seattle. I don't know why Seattle, but Seattle. Those were my original thoughts listening to it the first time, because it's not a very impactful listening experience. At 43 minutes and 11 songs, the length of the average Pavement LP minus half the songs, opening with the chunky and mellow, possibly peaking. It's definitely the most danceably rhythmic song on the album, and it's the opener, and doesn't really set the mood for the album, because the next three tracks, Encyclopedia, Slim Style, and the big single off the album Neptune Avenue, are more reserved in the chunk. That's to say they're more down-tempo from the intro. Significantly, with Encyclopedia having a fun, almost playful jaunt to it, it feels eerily like a Pavement B-side, like it was just straight up cut off the album or unreleased music. I don't know if this was like intentional, but just listen to the song and you will hear it. But then we get to the more smoother pseudo ballad Slim Style, which was originally a nothing song in my first roundabout with the album, but has since become one of my favorites. Seriously, there's just something about the subtle heaviness of the guitar, paired with Hartman's softer vocals, which is in contrast to his usual vocals, which is like he's getting over a flu and refused to spit out the fucking loogie. But I'm not one to judge. It all comes together very nicely, even if the hook and chorus is a tad weak and the words unknown because Apple Music does not provide lyrics to fucking unknown 90s bands. Those pricks. The big single Neptune Avenue is essentially more of the same of what we've I've been getting from the start of the album, but with a little more effort. It's like you can feel, and by extension hear, the budget of the album on this song. It's not a bad song though. It's a fitting single for the band, and while initially I found it annoying, it later grew on me. Buckle Up Sunshine is a brief return to the chunk present in the opener, but still has much less going for it. It's another fun one that comes around, wipes his shoes, eat, and leaves. Same goes for Blue Oyster Bay, which admittedly has more going on, and it's the return of those softer vocals that makes it stick out more to me because, well, when Jesse actually clears his throat, I hear a semblance of something that could have been, and not Stephen Malcolm's doing his best, totally not Stephen Malcolm's impression. Chilling Excerpts is a breath of fresh air and would have been my candidate for a single off the album had I been alive and not yet not conceived. It's chunky, fun, it has backup vocals, and an actual memorable hook that goes absolutely fucking insane. The next two songs are where we get into a nothing territory on this album, and was what I remember the most when I made the comments about the album being a soundtrack from an indie rom-com. Excuse me. In short, they're boring. In long, they're a bucket full of stones that smell of wet glue. But all albums are and should be algorithmic, with the last two tracks being actually interesting and by most measures good. Horse and Ballet being another missed single chance was one I gravitated towards most when initially listening to the album. It's nothing special really, but makes me think, now is there any rhyme or reason for this album? I mean, other than to make money and get rich. I mean, get record labels rich. What was the concept? What were the themes of the album? What was Jesse hoping to get across? Was there really one? Because all I could think of is the day in the life of a 20-something. I find it hard to think of anything when it comes to any deeper thematic elements, which makes me think there isn't one. It feels very mundane, and it's not like it's a deeper album. It's very surface level, so if I'm missing something, I'm totally fine with that. The album ends on King's Point versus Steamboat, a fitting closer that suffers from the album's overall sound. I don't know if it was just me, but it sounded like the album was begging, no, dying for some orchestral strings or something to give a bigger feel. But then again, that could have just been me. Like I said, it's a closer, but monotonous nonetheless. It's layers upon layers upon layers of guitar with this album. And the first song to do something interesting production-wise, with some ghostly vocals in the background and Hartman's faint, low, breathy singing, makes it an interesting but creative misstep that stopped it from being great. And that's the album. It's a real touch and go type of thing. Nothing that really impacts the listeners in this first go around, at least in my case. It's only when you stumble across a song you forgottenly saved some summer ago where you see the album's beauty and its poo-poo stands. It leaves me conflicted each time because there's success, or inklings of it at least, and there's some heart and maybe not a whole lot of ambition, but at the time I was thinking this was their only album, so it always made me wonder what would a second shot have done to this band. But last year I was both pleasantly surprised and let down immensely. So there's this film, a forgotten little indie by the name of River of Grass. It's a bleak but slightly relatable movie by Kelly Reichardt that I recommend if you rather kill someone than talk about any issues in your life. And it has absolutely nothing to do with this video. Oh, except that it gave a co-producer credit to one Jesse Hartman. I don't know why, but when I discovered this, it absolutely threw me through a loop because while unknown to many, Kelly Reichardt is a well-regarded director and Jesse Hartman is, well, did you know who the hell he was before this video? But the producer credit wasn't what piqued my interest. An artist doing pretentious artist things is par for the course. No, my interest was in the whole other full-length album that was completely unknown to me. The overly appropriate name debut album is the debut album of Jesse and Company. And right off the bat, it's apparent that this is a debut album because, well, and I'm going to say this in my nicest voice, it licks donkey's throat. It's 41 minutes and 12 tracks, and its second verse same as the first, but since I reviewed it the way I listened, its second verse same as the first, but the second was actually audible and not sang by a bunch of fucking mutes. Well, that was needlessly cruel. And if Jesse Hartman happens to watch this video, I want him to know that I hate him. And his music is shit. Did he meet up with a rope in a tree? Okay, none of that is true. Well, the album isn't good, but it contains my favorite songs from the band, period. Evergladed, the riff you've been hearing on and off throughout the video, and Fantastic Sam. The problem with Debut for me is that it feels like constant filler. There's 12 songs on this project, and for each one that is good, there's one that's half-baked or just flat out a fart in a bucket. And much like Great Head on the Glory, there is no diversity in the sound whatsoever, which makes the songs just run together and is more overtly a Pavement ripoff than alternative. I don't believe the excuse of Freshman Records getting a pass for being bad, because it isn't bad. Well, it's just lazy, because there are arguably cases where success was even more of a reach for a band than Sammy, and this is just my opinion, but they may have just been industry plants. I have no evidence and I have no proof, but I didn't just pull this out of my ass, because when you look into the band, they managed, in the case of Jesse Hartman, went on to be under major record labels such as DGC, Interscope, and Island Records during his even more unknown project Laptop, which from my perspective seems weird. There were a bunch of alternative record labels, still are to this day, that he could have been on, many that would have cultivated their sound and matched their style more fittingly. I think this is why they floundered, not because of the music, but because the public was somehow subconsciously aware of this fact. I don't know how, but and Luke Wood, I told you he would be important, is the former COO, not CEO, of Beats. And now when you think about it, it's not that strange. Guy in music industry stays in music industry, becomes music industry titan, but he's from a failed project. Sammy was commercially unknown, and any little success they saw was due to comparison. They're not some indie darling. They're a niche of a niche in the mind of a man who was hit by a brick. I mean, it's probably not that weird, but it's certainly a nice success story in huge quotation marks for someone who was basically McCarthy to Lennon or Big Boy to Andre. But it's interesting. I found after re-listening to debut album and then Tales of Getting Neck from the Glory, you can really hear the ambition in the songs, even if they didn't pan out quite as expected. That's not to say that I ever believed that there was no effort and that it was all just corporate idealism hidden behind the mask, but it's hard to shake those allegations in my opinion. It just felt like there wasn't a whole lot of ambition, loads of charm, but when it comes down to the chord progression and unique time signatures, that makes or break a band. And it's clear that wasn't the goal. They're juvenile record in the way that it's youthful and weirdly timeless at times, despite lack of notoriety. In the case of Tales of Great Glorious Neck, that is, the big thing for Sammy as a band, and I know I'm 100% guilty throughout this whole entire video, is shaking that pavement stink it's carried throughout its existence. And while I don't know Jesse Hartman personally, I imagine it's probably because they're vocally similar at times, but the bands are sonically different. And there's more of a hard rock / rock revival thing going on with Sammy, and at least in my listening experience, there's more of a similarity to something like the White Stripes or the earlier Strokes than there is to Pavement, because if I had to properly identify them, and them being Sammy being the band, it would be proto-indie sleaze. The music atmosphere and aesthetic and overall attitude matches that of an urban hipster who reeks of nicotine but doesn't smoke and has a clear face with coffee-stained teeth, and the fashion sense of a cartoonishly homosexual villain from the 90s. And the conclusion I always come to when listening to Sammy is that if they made nothing but moody hard rock art ballads, they'd be at the very least remembered by more than the contention of Pavement fans and people who have too much time on their hands working a late shift at Meyer.